There is a specific kind of silence that lives in the chest of those born between the echoes of a great war and the digital scream of the modern age. It is the silence of the latchkey, a heavy, metallic quiet that greeted you when you turned the key in an empty house after school. You weren't neglected in the way the world defines it now, but you were ghosted by a society that was too busy reinventing itself to notice you were raising yourself. If you were listening to this, you likely know the weight of that invisibility. You are the bridge that no one crosses, the generation that learned to be okay with being forgotten. And yet, there is a profound, aching fatigue in always having to be the one who just handles it. We call it resilience, but for many of you, it feels more like a permanent state of emotional armor. You grew up in the shadows of giants, the boomers who took up all the air in the room, and the millennials who followed, demanding the room be redesigned for their comfort. And there you were, in the middle, the forgotten middle child of history. But what happens to the human psyche when its primary survival mechanism is self-reliance? What happens when the world tells you that your value is measured by how little you need from anyone else? To understand the soul of Gen X, we have to go back to the empty playground. Think of the 1970s and 80s not as a nostalgic montage of neon and cassette tapes, but as a landscape of profound, unsupervised freedom that often felt like a desert. The psychological blueprint of this generation was forged in a crucible of ambiguous loss. Your parents were often physically present, but emotionally distant, or perhaps they were simply gone, navigating the first great wave of divorce culture and the rise of the dual-income household. You weren't just playing outside until the streetlights came on. You were internalizing a message that the world was unpredictable and that the only person you could truly trust to keep you safe was the one looking back at you in the mirror. This created a specific psychological phenomenon, the hyper-independent child. When a child realizes that their caregivers are overwhelmed, distracted, or absent, they perform a radical act of internal surgery. They cut away their own needs. If you don't ask for help, you can't be disappointed when it doesn't arrive. If you solve every problem yourself, you maintain a sense of control in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. But this independence is a double-edged sword. It is a fortress that protects you, but it is also a prison that keeps the world at a distance. You became the generation of whatever, not because you didn't care, but because whatever was a shield against the crushing weight of disappointment. It was a way to say, I see the cracks in the foundation, and I've already learned how to live in the rubble. There is a concept in psychology known as parentification, where a child is forced to take on the emotional or practical responsibilities of an adult. For many Gen Xers, this wasn't an anomaly, it was the standard operating procedure. You were the ones making the sandwiches, watching the younger siblings, and navigating the complex emotional moods of parents who were themselves struggling with the collapse of the traditional family unit. You became experts at reading the room before you even knew how to read a book. You learned to scan for danger, for instability, for the moment that the peace would break. This hypervigilance didn't vanish when you grew up. It just transitioned into your careers, your marriages, and your parenting. You are the ones who notice the flickering light bulb, the slight shift in a partner's tone, the looming deadline that everyone else is ignoring. You are the fixers, the doers, the ones who carry the mental load of entire organizations and families without ever asking for a thank you. But the cost of being the fixer is a slow, methodical erosion of the self. You have spent decades pouring from a cup that was never truly filled in the first place. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the reliable one, the one who never breaks down, never complains, and never misses a beat. It's a functional melancholy. You are highly successful, you are capable, you are the backbone of the world, and yet, late at night, there is a hollow ringing in your ears. It is the sound of the child who is still waiting for someone to notice that they are tired. You grew up during the Cold War, under the literal shadow of the mushroom cloud. You saw the Challenger explode on a classroom television. You saw the transition from analog to digital, the death of the neighborhood, and the birth of the surveillance state. You have lived through more once-in-a-lifetime catastrophes than any generation before you, and your response has always been a cynical, stoic shrug. This cynicism is your internal anchor. It keeps you from drifting into the toxic positivity that defines modern culture. But it also makes it very hard to believe in the possibility of genuine, soft, unearned care. You struggle to receive. When someone offers to help you, your first instinct is suspicion. What do they want? Or they won't do it right anyway. This is the invisible wall of Gen X, a barrier built of bricks labeled self-sufficiency, pragmatism, and expect nothing. We see this manifest in the way you approach aging. You are the sandwich generation, squeezed between aging parents who need your care and adult children who are struggling to find their footing in a broken economy. Once again, you are the bridge. You are the emotional shock absorbers for the world. You are caring for people who didn't always know how to care for you, and you are trying to provide a softness for your children that you never personally experienced. It is a noble, exhausting, and deeply lonely position to be in. You are rewriting the script of your lineage in real time, but you are doing it with trembling hands and a heart that hasn't had a vacation in 30 years. There is a concept in psychology called the midlife unraveling. It's different from a midlife crisis. A crisis is about trying to reclaim youth. An unraveling is about the moment when the armor you've worn since you were 10 years old finally becomes too heavy to carry. It's the moment you realize that independence was actually just a sophisticated form of isolation. You begin to wonder, if I stopped doing everything for everyone, who would actually stay? Am I loved for who I am, or am I just appreciated for what I provide? This question is the ghost that haunts the Gen X psyche. Because you were raised to be invisible, you have become masters at hiding in silent sight. You hide behind your work, behind your roles as parents, behind your dry wit, and your curated playlists of songs from a time when things felt more visceral. But beneath the whatever, there is a profound desire to be truly seen, not for your competence, but for your vulnerability. The tragedy is that you have become so good at being the hero that you have forgotten how to be the person who needs saving. Think about the metaphor of the analog soul in a digital world. You remember what it was like to be unreachable. You remember the weight of a rotary phone, the patience of waiting for a letter, the physical reality of a world that didn't demand your attention every 3 seconds. You carry a sense of ancestral grief for a version of humanity that is disappearing. This makes you feel like an alien in the modern era, watching people perform their lives for likes and validation, while you sit in the corner wondering why no one values the quiet, the grit, and the truth anymore. You feel like the last keepers of a secret language. But this alienation is also where your greatest strength lies. You are the only ones who know how to bridge the gap between the old world and the new world. You are the translators. Yet the burden of translation is heavy. You are translating the needs of your boomer parents to your Gen Z children, and in the process, your own voice is getting lost in the static. You are the mediators of a great cultural divorce, trying to keep the peace while your own house is quietly burning down from burnout. Why is it that you find it so hard to rest? Why does the idea of doing nothing feel like a moral failure? This is the productivity trap of your childhood. In the absence of external validation, you learned to validate yourself through doing. If the house was clean, if the grades were good, if the problems were solved, then you were safe. Now, as an adult, your nervous system is wired for high-functioning anxiety. You don't know how to exist without a task. You are a human doing rather than a human being, and the silence of a Saturday afternoon feels less like peace and more like a void that needs to be filled. This void is actually the small child inside you, the one who was left alone with the television and the silence. That child didn't want to be a resilient leader. They wanted to be held. They wanted to be told that they didn't have to figure it out on their own. And until we address that original silence, the exhaustion will never truly go away. We have to look at the psychology of the ghost, the part of you that has spent 50 years making yourself small so that you wouldn't be a burden, only to realize that the world has taken your silence as a sign that you are indestructible. But you are not indestructible. You are just very good at pretending. And the pivot point of your healing begins when you realize that your survival mechanisms, the very things that saved you in 1985, are the things that are starving you in 2026. The invisible wall